Change is not a bad thing. The world is a constantly evolving ball rolling down the road. It's never going to go in reverse and go backwards. Take advantage of that. Always be looking ahead when it comes to business, when it comes to opportunity. Live in the moment, appreciate the now, but always think as things change, I could take some things from the past and adapt them, but utilize them going forward. So don't be afraid of change.
Hello, everybody. Great to have you here. It's indeed a pleasure for me to introduce our guest for today in the next series of the leadership series for peopleHum. Just a quick introduction of peopleHum. It is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform. The winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that is specifically built and crafted for employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and a video channel specifically targeting leaders and young leaders through our Leaders Hum series. Our guest today is Newman. Matt has been working in the financial services industry since 1997. And he's currently at Transamerica, a financial services firm. In 2018, Matt wrote a book on his journey through brain cancer, and it was a top release at Amazon in its first week of release itself. He continues to speak publicly for Transamerica, as well as is a motivational speaker for Newman Capital LLC. He has raised over $100,000 for charities, including Voices Against Brain Cancer, and is part of numerous things that help him to really inspire people through their journey in their lives as well as career. So, Matt, indeed a great pleasure having you with us today.
The honor is mine. Thank you so much for having me today.
Great. So I guess just to kick it off, maybe you could just talk a little bit about your kind of professional side of the house and what you work on and how your journey has been till date.
Yeah, it's funny. I graduated college from the University of Delaware in 1996, and I remember graduating, and Maya Angelou just gave this beautiful commencement speech, and my mother and father come onto the football field. I grew up about 18, 20 miles outside New York City in northern New Jersey. My mother was a school teacher and my father was a financial advisor. Those are two completely different occupations, and they plant seeds in you at a young age with lessons that you learn. Seeds that make no sense at the time and you can't comprehend the reality of what they mean, but later in life they will bloom. They will give you information that was actually put inside of you a very long time ago. And I remember my father coming up to me and saying, "Not bad, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, college graduate, right?" He said, "So what do you want to do now?" I said, "Well, Dad, I want to be a financial advisor. I want to join your practice." And in his very thick Bronx accent, I will clean my language up drastically, he said there was no bleeping way I was joining his firm. And I was upset and I was angry. And every picture at graduation of me is like jerk. He was giving me one of the great lessons in life. There's no free lunches. Go earn it. See if this is your passion, your career, the path you want to be on. And if it is, we'll talk in a few years. So I went to get licensed as a financial advisor, but I became something called a wholesaler. What a wholesaler is companies manufacture mutual funds, annuities, 401ks. I can go down the list of financial products. Wholesalers get the same licenses that financial advisors have. But we work directly for the company, almost like that middle person, to go meet with financial advisors and try to show them why they should use our products in certain situations. So I started doing that. And I remember my father sitting down with me right as I started my career, young kid, 23, 24 years old, going to go out and take on the world. And I remember my father saying 3 things I want you to remember. Number 1, if you don't believe in the product or a family member wouldn't own it, don't sell it. You lose the battle to win the war. It's about building honesty and connection. Number 2, he goes, I just said honesty. Always be honest with people. At some point, they'll know if you're not. If you're always honest, you'll put your head on a pillow at night knowing you're doing what you believe in and is the right thing. And number 3 is he goes, you got a soccer scholarship to college. Take that work ethic, combine those things together, and there's no limit on what you can do. So I basically went around with the same story. The job of the financial advisor is to be there when things are bad, to have a plan in place prior to the negative, to give people good news at the deepest and darkest of times, to give them some semblance of hope to avoid regret and resentment because we have a plan in place prior to the negative. And it became a passion. It became something I loved doing. I was almost doing financial advising, but from a bit of a different perspective, which those seeds were blooming in me that my father planted in me years earlier. So in 2002, I became the number one person at my company. And in 2003, I became one of the number one people in our entire industry. And I remember my father calling me up going, I think we have to have a talk about you joining my practice. I said, no, Dad, I'm good. I think you can't afford me any longer. I think I found my spot. So what it did is it took this lesson of financial planning, which is mostly legal documentation, wills and power of attorneys, insurance. Most people want what they can't get. They want life insurance when it's too late. They want long-term care when it's too late. They want a financial plan after they don't know what to do any longer because they lost a lot of money. And it became a passion of mine and became my craft. So I became a wholesaler, and that's what I do at Transamerica.
I see. Very good. And obviously, on the personal side, you've been through, something which a lot of people would be, very, very worried to try and go through that. And you've been a brain cancer survivor, and you've talked a lot of, survival and planning and all of that. Could you share some of what you went through, what helped you overcome some of these, and what advice you would have to our audience?
It's interesting that life takes this, journey that we think we're on, that we dictate, and it starts to deviate the paths that we're on. There's a lot we have control over, and there's a lot we don't. And unfortunately, it's how we react and how we digest the reality of the situation that we're put in that will dictate a lot of where we're going. When we build up, as I mentioned before, regret, resentment, negativity, it's a weight on our shoulders that makes our journeys that much more difficult. So to make a long story very short, my father-in-law was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at 60 years old. And my first experience with cancer happened when I was 15. My Grandma Harriet, was diagnosed with cancer. I really wasn't old enough to understand it or digest it or get the realities of what was actually happening. But one day she was Grandma Harriet. The next day she was wearing a cancer turban. And the next day she was gone. What I do remember is the fracturing of what it did to my mother. It changed her forever. My mom and grandmother spoke every single day. Every weekend, we were at their house in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. They're at our house in Parsippany. My mother became a different person, and she cried nonstop. And I wish I got it more. I wish I was old enough to truly get it and could have hugged her. I just didn't understand. I was too young. My wife and my father-in-law are very similar. So when he got diagnosed, we had 2 kids under 3. My wife was pregnant, and she made it her full-time job to do nothing but take care of him and our family in every way possible. She never bitched. She never complained. She would drive him every day, 45 minutes back and forth, Whipple procedures, chemo, radiation. It was an honor to be around. I watched Warriors. I saw what really matters. I saw how to truly be there for someone when things are bad. And I was so proud to be part of this family. 2.5 years into it, which usually you're not going to make it that long with pancreatic cancer. It's like cancer's like a roller coaster. It goes up, down, left. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your plans. It does what it wants, when it wants. And I got in a car accident, just an icy, snowy, miserable day, fender bender, my car got totaled, and I started to get these massive headaches. But it wasn't about me. It was about now my 3 young children. It was about my father-in-law in this fight. Then I started to lose all ability to sleep. It wasn't about me. I speak professionally now, but I spoke professionally in financial services prior to this. So speaking was normal for me. I started to get these, what I thought were strokes. These hot flashes would hit me in the face, and slur and gurgle would just pour out of my mouth. It happened while I was giving speeches. It happened while I was training for runs. It happened while I was driving. The 11th time it happened, I decided I need to go to the hospital immediately. So I called my wife, and we met at a place called Capital Health in Hopewell, New Jersey. I had a 90-minute ride. This started in, call it January, February of 2013. It's now May 14th. And as I'm driving down, I'm thinking, all right, they're going to give me good news. They're going to figure it out. They're going to tell me I'm going to die. My head's all over the place. My wife and I meet in the parking lot. We walk in. And they tell me they're going to give me a CAT scan. I'm like, yeah, CAT scan, no big deal. It's like an X-ray. So I go in, they do the CAT scan. They come back out, and they go, okay, we know the problem. By the way, this was 7 hours later. They tell me the news. I go, what's going on? They go, you have a lesion on the left frontal lobe of your brain. And I'm thinking, car accident. Even though the airbag went off, I probably dinged my head and I just didn't remember it. They go, it's causing massive pain, loss of ability to sleep. And Mr. Newman, you're not having strokes. You're having seizures on the left frontal lobe of your brain, which affects speech and memory. And as difficult as that sounds to digest, I was like, yes, that's the deal. Let's diagnose it, fix it, great. So I went through MRI after MRI, MRI after MRI. At 3 o'clock in the morning, they come in, they go, well, we have to do one more with contrast. My wife tells me she's going to go home, make lunch for our 3 kids that are 5, 3, and 2, find a ride for her father for chemo as his roller coaster is heading back down. I said, I'm going to be in there for an hour. Don't worry about it. Just come back when you can. So the nurse comes in to get me. She goes, all right, Mr. Newman, one more MRI with contrast. Got to get in the wheelchair. I said, I've had enough of the wheelchair. I just did the Broad Street run 8 days ago. That's the largest 10-mile run in the U.S. It's based in Philadelphia. I said, I'm not doing that. She goes, you have to get in. Liability. So I get in the wheelchair. And she grabs that clipboard, goes, all right, Mr. Newman, MRI. We need to see how big your brain tumor is. I go, it's a lesion. And that was the moment at 39 I was diagnosed with brain cancer and everything started to change.
Wow, that's something. So help us with how did you overcome it, and kind of pieces of advice on people.
Yeah, so they took me back in and did all these MRIs. They brought me back to the bed, told me I wouldn't be going anywhere. That I was going to have this was it's basically Wednesday morning at this point. That I was going to have a major craniotomy. They were going to cut half my skull off. They were going to take the tumor out. I wouldn't know the severity of it for about 10 days. And they brought me back to my bed. They plugged me into about 30 different machines. I just started crying. And I started off retrospectively. The reality is, you have brain cancer, you're going to die. My father-in-law is dying. I'm now going to die. I got 3 kids under 5 years old. And I'm thinking there must be something I did that caused this. I'm a good dad. I'm a good husband. And strength is not how big your arms are. Strength is not how much you bench press. Strength is something that's located deep down in our bellies. At the deepest and darkest of times, we could find it, we could grab it, and we could own it. I didn't know I had it in me. I saw it, I took it, it was mine. This is my journey. Cancer is just along for the ride. And I just started cursing my brains out. And the nurses who tell the story to this day come running in. They go, oh my God, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. That was my pity party. If I'm going down swinging. There is no more. And I didn't know I had this in me. You learn the realities of strength and fight. And we all have this component to us where we push stuff deep down into our bellies to alleviate all the negativity that's there. But what we find is when we need something, there's an outlet, there's a catharsis, there's a way for us to grab it. And it's not the size of our bodies. And that's where you see strength lies from a much different perspective when you have a new set of lenses that you've been gifted with. And I said gifted because that's what cancer did. It gave me a new way to see life, to appreciate the moment, to live in the now. And it turned instantly right there. And my feeling at that point was, if this is going to happen, let's do this. So what started to happen is the surgeon comes walking in and my wife's wiping her eyes next to him. Your husband's got brain cancer. Your dad's pancreatic cancer. It's a lot to throw on somebody. And she looks at me, she goes, your parents and my parents are on their way down. Her parents weren't coming. Her dad was my cancer partner. I stopped believing in irony at that given moment. He was there to show me how to act with independence, with dignity, like a warrior, how to be there for family. So I said to her, I go, do me a favor, give me the iPad. She's like, yeah, do you want to watch a movie? They'll be here in like 20 minutes. I'm like, no, just give me the iPad. That was the moment I realized I needed to make sure everything was taken care of on my end. I have a family. I have responsibility. The first thing I pulled up was my will. Done. I pulled up my power of attorney to make sure my wife has the ability to make all the necessary decisions going forward. Something that has nothing to do with the amount of wealth you have. These are things you can do online. Done. I pulled up my life insurance. Done. I went through everything to make sure my family would be taken care of. And it was at that given moment I realized every speech I ever gave on finance was about me. I was the shoemaker his kids had shoes. I did everything that I talked about. And this alleviated any of that weight that I mentioned that could be on my shoulders and allowed me to fight, because I knew, aside from grieving, that my family would maintain their life. They'd still be in the house they're in. There would be something there to alleviate some type of extra burden that would define me. And when you define yourself, it's the legacy that you leave. And for those of us that don't do this, we leave a legacy of negativity and evilness and anger, which can be avoided not by money, by basic legal documentation of paperwork. We have an obligation to do that. And all that did is inspire me more. So I believe that having the plan in place, being able to know that I have less things to worry about, I could take on the battle at hand, not worrying about other stuff, but more importantly, learning what strength truly was at that given moment and how important love and family is.
Gotcha. Very, very inspiring, honestly. I think, what you've been through and how you've kind of come through. And again, I think, in day-to-day life, and especially since a lot of our audience is, people who are in the corporate world, right? Sometimes what happens is you're surrounded by your coworkers and, negativity just keeps on piling. So what words of advice would you have to those people who feel like they're surrounded all around and everybody is, unhappy with their jobs and, feeling frustrated with their bosses and so on? I would love, what would you tell them?
One I call it the bubble. And we do a lot of coaching on this. If the bubble is, you're in this bubble, and when you're in that bubble, you only see what's in that bubble. You don't have a perspective of it from the outside. You don't realize there's a whole universe outside of that bubble. One is bet on yourself. Believe in you. There's no risk, no reward. It's okay to become entrepreneurial and take opportunities. That happened for me, not on purpose. But when it started to happen, you realize that when you have a passion, when you have a love for something, it can give you this inspiration to go get things done. So if you're not happy, do something about it. Too many people sit there, they bitch and moan and they do nothing. You own your life. You own the path that you're on. It may take different versions of where it's going to go. It may change the course that you want to be on. But you own it. It's yours. So you can take something and you can bet on yourself a little bit. So if you're not happy, this is what I say to people all the time. What are you doing about it? Listen, if you're just frustrated, there's things you can do to alleviate that frustration. Mine became writing. I didn't know that. I mean, I can tell you that when I went through everything I went through, I started to send these emails to friends and family. I had this new perspective. I understood the fragility of life. I understood how quickly things could change. Things that were basic and understandable that I never really comprehended until I took on this challenge. And I would send them out to alleviate the negativity that was building up in my stomach. The reality is, to answer your question, nobody has a life of rainbows and unicorns. We all put on this fake facade outside, and we all have our scars and the fights that we deal with in some capacity. We push a lot of that stuff deep down into our bellies. And I know I keep saying deep down into our bellies, but we do. We push it all down. That needs to find an outlet, or we're going to combust. My outlet became writing. Do you remember at the beginning I said we get seeds planted in us? And my mom was a teacher who did writing.
Right.
That started to transpose into me. I started to write. I started to send these messages on appreciation of life, living in the now, understanding how precious my family is, wanting to be there every given moment. It's not about yesterday. It's not about tomorrow. It's about right now. I did that for me. I never read one after I wrote it. I would get it out like vomit off my chest. Everybody who's listening to this, you have to find your angle, your outlet, your catharsis. 4 years into writing these emails, for me, by the way, I never sat down to write one. I keep going through cancer tests. I had grade 3 astrocytoma, chemo, radiation. I have to get tests all the time because it could always come back. So my catharsis became writing. 4 years into it, I had 20,000 people following my emails. I was not on social media. Every day I would get this. Matt, could you put this person on? Could you put that person on? And here's what I realized. Cancer's like buying a car. You buy a car, you leave the lot, you look around and go, oh my God, look at that. That car's everywhere. Wrong. Car was always there. You just never noticed it, so you had a direct connection to it. And that's what happened to me with cancer. And I started to see people with depression, different diseases, negativity. We're all in the same boat. We're all dealing with something. And what people are looking for is realness. and purity. They're sick of the shtick of some dude giving them a bunch of statistics of why they should do well. They want to know that others are on a journey with them. Others have taken on realness. So I decided to write a book. And I wrote that book for me. There was no business plan. There was no ghostwriter. I did it for myself because it was a cathartic way for me to get rid of the negativity and focus on the positive. It came out on March 23rd, 2018, almost 3 years ago. I called my mother that day in Parsippany, New Jersey. I go, hey, Ma, the book's coming out. She goes, you know no one's ever going to read it, right? No one cares about me. She goes, but you're going to put 3 copies in your safe. So when the kids are old enough, they'll be able to read the reality of what actually happened because they were so young. I said, I couldn't agree with you more, Mom. And 1 week later, we're #1 in 4 areas in Amazon, and my jaw hit the ground. And what I started to realize is what people are truly attracted to. And if we want to drive inspiration for these people that are in the bubble, that are going through a negative time, share quotes, share a story, listen to them, do something that's real. Don't give some fictitious way that they can, find something that they can utilize to beat what they're going through right now. If you connect them to something that shows that other people have made it through this, they can as well. And that will define you to them.
Right. Great. So one of the things that I think you talked about it earlier as well, was, kind of the importance of planning in your life. Maybe another thing you could, along the way, if you have certain either tips or tricks, or how do you convert these into habits so that, you can, again, we were talking of, going on a downward trend, and how do you protect or prevent yourself from falling into that trap, and, any habits or tips that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple. I'll talk about it on two aspects real quick. First, the financial component to it. We hear financial and we think about investing and stocks and mutual funds and crypto, we could say right now. That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is a basic plan. And unfortunately, most education systems around the world, they don't educate children on this. We get them into the real world, but we don't teach them anything about how to pick an employee benefit. The point I bring up is this. As we get older, as we have family, as we take on more responsibility, we have more of an obligation to protect and to plan. All that means is having a will, which you can go on legalzoom.com for $19 and do. That will dictate how you want your legacy to be left. You can do a power of attorney. Life insurance is a big thing. I'm completely uninsurable. 8 years later, I have all the planning I need. God forbid something happens to me, it grows back. My family will monetarily be taken care of. These are little things that will alleviate all the negativity you're going through because you don't have to worry about them. You don't want to be stuck going, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. Can I do this? Can I do that? And that's what we see. People want what they can't get. The basic components of planning are unbelievably simple. And by not doing them, you're setting yourself up for an issue later on, or you're changing the way that you leave your legacy to your family. You could be leaving them in a very difficult spot, which they will think of you differently going forward. So the first component is really that. The number 2 is never giving back the lessons that you've been gifted with. And I talk a lot about this. We all know the people that have lost a ton of weight and then 3 years later they gain it back. People who went through something and they see a new perspective on life and then they go back to their old ways. I will never do that. And there's 2 things I do. One, you can't really see this, but in the corner of my office up there is the mask I wore during radiation 7.5 years ago. It will always stare up there and stare at me. Every time I get in a bad mood, I want to take a look at that and go, calm down. Yeah. So people could put notes. They could put little things on their phone. Number 2 is this. I was having a conversation one day with my surgeon. He did a huge C right here, pulled the whole thing off like I mentioned earlier. And one day we're talking, I said, I wish you didn't do such a good job. He looks at me and goes, what the hell does that mean? I go, I wish I had a massive scar right here. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, if you shave your head, you could see it. I go, I get it, but I wish I could see it all the time. He goes, why? I go, every time that I'm in a bad mood, maybe I yell at my kids, maybe something, I want to look in my rearview mirror and see that scar. And I want to always remember to never give back the lessons that I've been gifted with. He goes, really? So I decided to do something. I decided to tattoo my entire arm with my story. Everything on here is about what I've been through. So every time I take a shower, it puts me in check. I did this for nobody but myself. And I'm thankful to the artists that put this all together for me. And they did amazing work in New York City. But more importantly, it's my reminder, because if we don't tag ourselves for reminders, we could give back the lessons that have been presented to us.
Super inspiring, actually. My last question, actually. What piece of advice would you be giving? I guess your kids probably are still a little far away from graduating, but maybe the graduating seniors who come out, obviously, in these pandemic times, things that nobody has been prepared for. What advice would you give them?
Couple. One, and I use this line all the time: change breeds complacency or change breeds opportunity. Change is not a bad thing. The world is a constantly evolving ball rolling down the road. It's never going to go in reverse and go backwards. Take advantage of that. Always be looking ahead when it comes to business, when it comes to opportunity. Live in the moment, appreciate the now, but always think as things change, I could take some things from the past and adapt them, but utilize them going forward. So don't be afraid of change. Unfortunately, as many get older, they become very set in their ways and they become comfortable, and industry passes them by. Do not allow that to happen, and amazing things can transpire from you continually taking advantage of newness that's coming out. The second component I would bring up to them is find something you're passionate about. To go back to someone at the beginning of our conversation, people are negative. Listen, I've been in corporate America for a long time. It's a grind, corporate America. You're a cog in a wheel for the most part. It could be a very good wheel. It could move unbelievably quickly, but you're in this cog situation where there's people ahead of you and ahead of you and ahead of you and all this other stuff. Find your passion, find your love. And if you truly believe in it, ride the roller coaster. Amazing things can happen, because the biggest bet you can make is on yourself.
Wow, cool. All right. Well, Matt, I do want to really sincerely thank you for sharing your story, sharing your learning, sharing your insights with our audience. I am sure a lot of them are going to be super inspired by what you've gone through, and hopefully even reading your book will inspire them to keep some of these lessons at the back of their mind, as we go through what appears tough for us, but are really, normal, mundane things. So thank you very, very much.
The honor was mine. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matt.